Hello everybody, welcome to GB Talks. My name is Divsha Bhatt, Technology Editor at Gulf Business, and today we are here with John Hathaway, Regional Vice President, IMEA region for Beyond Trust. Hello John, how are you doing today?
Really well, thank you for inviting me. Pleasure to be here.
So John, just to begin with, recently Beyond Trust issued a 2022 Cybersecurity Survival Guide. What drove the need for this guide, and can you let us know more about this?
Yeah, I think it's important to understand what drove the creation of the report in the first place. Over the last couple of years, as everything's changed around us from a technology point of view, the cybersecurity threat landscape has significantly changed, and there were some very high-profile cyber attacks. If you think back to the SolarWinds or Colonial attacks, there were some big signatures on what happened within those attacks that really were worth noting. And you know, this whole hybrid working environment, the rise of ransomware, and we've just seen a massive increase in the risk surface which is out there. And if you are in an IT security position or an IT position, what you have to look at with your threat landscape is way bigger, way more complex, way more multifaceted than it was, you know, the year previous, and that's where the report came from.
You just mentioned ransomware. So we all know that ransomware is not going anywhere, at least. So, in your 2022 predictions, if I remember, you had mentioned that there will be new paradigms to extort money this year.
Yeah, I mean, look, you have to understand that ransomware is probably the end point of a cyber attack. A lot of what ransomware is about is lateral movement, and in traditional IT environments, that's something that's been focused on by companies like ours and many others for a long time, and our least privileged product directly addresses the ability of ransomware to laterally move in terms of locking down privilege on an endpoint. But our prediction, and it's not a prediction, this has happened already when you think about some of the attacks that have happened recently in the OT space. OT spaces and environments generally used to be locked down, but as the world has changed and people need to remotely access not just IT environments, OT environments, they're now more exposed to the world and therefore bad actors than they ever have been before. And we're seeing ransomware move into the OT environment. So having the ability to be able to protect that environment and stop exposing what is typically an organization's greatest assets in terms of either information or revenue generating tools, we typically find that organizations would want to protect that environment more. They'd be more willing to pay to, you know, release themselves from a ransomware attack, but we're seeing malware and bad actors focusing on it for that reason, and that's really where we're seeing ransomware move to. But you know, everybody understands that ransomware is such a big subject again. It kind of went away for a while. I don't know why, because it's quite low-hanging fruit for fairly simplistic known malware which you can adjust, but it's in the forefront of a lot of organizations' views. It's so damaging. If you look at the cost to remediate, let's say you've got 1,000 computers, if you don't pay the ransom, that encryption will mean you probably have to start again. And not just the replacement of equipment, but the data that you lose is huge. So ransomware is serious, really serious.
Do you think, John, you can highlight on some of your other predictions as well?
Yeah, so again, back to that report highlighted several other areas. This hybrid working environment where, you know, the old style perimeter walls of your data center, where everything was secure, the network within it, the firewalls around it, the server protection would be in there. It's good if you're sat in the office, but with so many people working from home, often on personal devices, how do you balance that with this personal device attaching to that data center, to the company information, data, or whatever it is, financials that you're trying to use on your own personal laptop? It's a big risk, and how a privilege is exposed within that environment. And then if you look at the vulnerability report that Microsoft releases, year on year last year, 48% increase in vulnerabilities that Microsoft would allow. So vulnerabilities, again, are easy ways into an environment. When you get in there, what happens? How is remote support and privileged remote access governed within an environment? So when you look at that risk service, any one of those things is fairly significant when it comes to how do I control that environment? If I'm a CISO, how do I ensure that I am giving my company the right level of protection that is within it? So for us, in terms of how we would address these, we're fortunate. I think when you look at the evolution of security in the last 5, maybe even 10 years, organizations have done what would be the easy thing naturally, right? What the easy things are to do, installing a parameter. Those more difficult things to do, the things which will require a high level of technical capability to install and configure for your organization, you know, it's tough, not just in the Middle East, but globally. There's a big skill shortage when it comes to cybersecurity skills and in some instances IT skills. But what we have seen in the last recent times is a huge increase, particularly in this region, of skills that are here already, cybersecurity skills that allow us to address what I would call the fundamentals of security. If you look at any of the compliance organizations in our region, they'll have a set of critical controls, whether that is data loss prevention, whether that is endpoint control, but control of privilege is one of the most significant things you can do to lock down and improve your security posture, reduce that threat landscape down to a much smaller place. But the reports out there, whether it's again Microsoft, whether it's the Verizon, that they estimate 80% of known malware and cyber attacks are as a direct result of misuse, abuse, or theft of a privileged account. So if you can lock down privileges, manage, secure, record, then you're going to be in a much better place when it comes to protecting yourself from a cyber attack. You talk of the ransomware issue. If you can secure endpoints right across Windows, NIX, Unix, Linux, and lock down all of the endpoints or servers that are within your organization to only extend privilege to those users and applications which require it, and stop anybody accessing or malware executing or laterally moving, you're again ahead of the curve when it comes to protecting yourself from these hybrid working environments. Remote support and remote access is a huge issue we know of. You will have seen in the market where third-party remote access is a huge issue for many organizations, where third parties may not be who they say they are, or may have less security on their endpoint, which when they connect to your organization, what are they either taking out or what are they either putting into your network? And securing that remote access is a huge issue for the organizations we work with, and something we're seeing more and more interest in with our own solutions.
Over the past couple of years, I believe we have also been hearing a lot about zero trust. So what is your take on this?
You know, we know some of the organizations we work with here that won't let us through the door if we use the word zero trust, because what does it mean? But it is a relevant question. And again, go back to traditional working environments and data centers that everybody would know, would see, would be able to secure. The days of a perimeter, which is static and just controlling access into it rather than knowing what people are doing, not very granular. Zero trust really is about dynamic understanding down to a user and asset level of who is accessing, which user is accessing that asset, and what they are doing, right down to very, very granular levels. No one gets access to any part of your environment unless an organization understands who you are and what you're doing, and then recording what's going on. And that really is the fundamentals of what we would talk about when we talk about zero trust. True zero trust is exceptionally difficult to achieve when you think about, if I say every user and every asset, organizations will have things like their own applications that they develop. Well, how does any vendor give you the ability to manage security on a very customized, developed asset? but there is so much you can do to provide that granular level of access. When you think about the perimeter, many people are saying now identity is the new perimeter wherever you are, whether it's at home, in the office, on the road, and giving as much control, whether it's normal identity or privileged identity, whether it's that secure remote access, whether that's endpoint least privilege, whether it's the help desk, wherever you are accessing data, as long as you can provide controls around it, that's really key when it comes to Zero Trust.
Earlier in your conversation, you also spoke about the evolution of security. So talking about privileged access management, how do you think this has evolved?
Yeah, if you look at when I first started with Beyond Trust many years ago, privileged access management was really the preserve of financial institutions. Some critical infrastructure would have version 1 of what privileged access management was. It wasn't very friendly to use. It wasn't very integrated into the environment. Some good tools, right? The security around the storage of credentials was good. But if I'm an IT user, do I really want to use it? Not particularly. It slows me down. It stops me being creative in the environment. So really where we see the evolution of that is the ability to connect into everything, whether that's cloud assets, whether that is into a IoT environment or an OT environment, whether that is just general IT environments, and how quick, how slick, how seamless it can look, not reducing productivity. And then when you look at integration back into an ecosystem for IT, whether that's correlation into a SIM tool, whether that's integration into EDR to provide more intelligent information as to what we're stopping happening, whether that's AI automation to make some really automated decisions, which again, when you look at, everyone talks about digitalization and what it really means, that's just more to control. One person, one security team can't control that. So how privilege can help and integrate into a security platform to be able to reduce any threat, cycle passwords more efficiently for high critical assets or every single time, provide access to the people that need it when they need it and take it away just in time privilege management. And these are some of the things that we see in the evolution of privileged access management, and it's evolving all the time, where we're talking about how do we deploy our own solutions. Many people want them on-premise, but if you want it in a cloud instance that's secure, so it can be a true global PAM solution that is multi-tenanted, directly accessed, where organizations don't even want their own data center anymore. They want everything managed in the cloud. The advantage of security, of management, of time saved, of flexibility to serve dynamic workforces, and how privileged access management works with that. It's the direction that this is going, and privileged access management is more relevant today than it was 5 years ago or when we started, and that's really the evolution of PAM, as we would call it.
So looking at the current threat landscape of the Middle East region, what advice would you give for organizations based on for their cybersecurity priorities?
For every organization, their risk will be related back to whatever it is their organization would identify. If it's a bank, it's obviously money. If it's, a water company, it's production of that for the environment, or an oil company, oil production. So identify what your most critical assets are, and then look at how anybody is accessing these assets. If it's OT, no longer the guy in the data center, how is anybody getting into that entire OT environment? How are we securing it? If it's a bank and it's an application in the digital space that's being created, what exposure are you giving your organization through that mobile device to their account? And how real is it? How easy is it to replicate? What security do you have sat around it? If we're employing a big third-party set of tools and vendors and partners and consultants that might access, how are they accessing your environment? What are employees doing? Whether they're at home or they're in the office or they're on-site in a remote data center, how are they accessing that environment? And one of the things we also see within the space is a rise in our Unix and Linux tool set, where we can help with identity access through our Identity Bridge, where we consolidate your credential into Windows Active Directory across a broad spectrum of Unix and Linux tools, but actually on a Unix server where you have freeware which will protect privilege, but it's freeware, it's open source, and there's the top 10 easy hacks of how you get around it. We also supply really fine-grained controls of Unix access to privilege, where often the crown jewels of your data, no matter where you are, and the rise of Unix, Linux. You look at the internet, they're saying internet-based servers, over 80% of those are Linux-based, typically, with that same security concern. And if you're in the cloud environment or you're going SaaS, these types of tool sets are going to be help to reduce that threat landscape significantly.
Great. Thank you so much for sharing the insights with us, John.
No, thank you very much. Pleasure to be here. Appreciate it.